Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu he's Stefan Bienkowski, and Stefan, I feel like this has been already such a long day. This is the second time we talk today. I was saying to you earlier today, it feels like I get up in the morning and get thrown into the deep end. It's been a week and a half. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. We were actually in a meeting earlier on and you were talking about having to get up at 5 a.m. for the meeting, and I think the other person on the call was feeling quite sorry for you, and I had to interrupt him, like, hold on a minute. There's a reason why he lives in Vancouver, and it's because it's like the most beautiful place in the world, so don't give him too much sympathy, okay? I think we'd all be happy to get up at 5 in the morning if it means we could walk out of the door and Vancouver was on our doorsteps.
Yeah, that's not wrong. I have no argument. It's actually even better. I'm on Vancouver Island, which is like even better than Vancouver. But yeah, I am actually looking at the Pacific as we speak. So no one should feel sorry for me. It's been a long week, and we covered a lot of stuff, right? We had the early presser together yesterday with Ozan Kabak, which I actually thought was quite interesting. We covered that in depth as well. On the Substack, both in written form and in podcast form. And then today, Stefan, and I think a lot of people will be asking about that. So there is stuff coming on this. It's the Fortuna Düsseldorf story, right? Them giving away free tickets next year for 3 games, and they're hoping to expand that to every game being free. So if you have questions about that, stay tuned. I was on a call with Fortuna this morning, and because it's not breaking news, we want to get the story right, Stefan? So stay tuned for this. But it's really fascinating.
No, absolutely. It's a really cool story, and does kind of contrast quite nicely with, stories you hear about in English football where tickets for games are now reaching 4 figures. Just absolutely bonkers, really. Especially when these clubs are making more money than ever. You do question if there's really that need to charge these kind of ticket prices, and then a club like Fortuna come along, and I know they're not the biggest club in Germany, and they're not really kind of maybe competing to offer players wages to help them win Bundesliga titles, so it is apples and oranges, but at the end of the day, I think every football club has to kind of pick its priorities, and fair play to Fortuna for doing the right thing here, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, as I will explain in far better detail, I think this is going to be a podcast that we're going to dedicate to next week, because it is in depth. I will write something brief for Forbes today, but there will be something really in depth coming on our shows. Please stay tuned on that. But it does actually, if it works, make economic sense. Speaking of economic sense, we also have to get paid, Stefan. So we're going to take a little break before we jump onto this podcast. This episode of the Gegenpressing podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, BELIEVE, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That is BLEAV for 50% welcome bonus. Bet online, where the game starts. So there you got it. Sponsors, they're important. They pay the bills. Anyways, enough of Fortuna. The Matchday 30th. I can't believe we're almost at the end of the season, and feel really bad for saying this, Stefan, but we've made so much fun of the Friday fixtures, and I think this is the second week in a row that the Friday fixture is actually a game of the week for one of us. So we're going to start with Bochum against Dortmund, which is a Revier derby. And it's a pretty important game for both teams. Bochum, of course, needing points to stay in the league. Dortmund needing points to keep rivals Bayern Munich at bay. They can make this gap to 4 points at least for a good 48 hours, which I think would put even more pressure on a very fragile Bayern Munich side. This is my game of the week. I think everyone should be tuning in on Friday. Not only because it's significant for the title race, it's significant for the relegation battle. It's a derby. I think there is a lot on the line. I think the storylines literally write themselves. And you know what? Bochum actually did take points off Dortmund, right? This is not going to be an easy fixture for them at all. Having said all that, I really feel there is a strong sense of confidence in this Dortmund team. I feel that the week off with no midweek games will go a long way of helping them. And I feel that all the key players, and then on top of that, the Marco Reus contract renewal that we broke down earlier in the video, so check that out. I think all of that will give them a ton of momentum. And I actually think they're going to cruise to a 2-0 victory here.
Yeah, interesting. I think this is going to be a really interesting game for a number of things. As you said, like there's the kind of emotional aspect of it too, where it's a derby, really intense derby. And, you know, as you said, Bochum have kind of been a thorn in the side of a number of big clubs recently. But it's also just a fantastic test of Dortmund's mental capacity, or metal, whatever you want to call it, going into this game. Because, you know, as we talked about on the main show this week, you know, if you look at if you break down how Dortmund have managed to catch up to Bayern, it's really been based on their fantastic home form. You know, I don't have the figures in front of me, but I think they're maybe 5 or 7 points ahead of Bayern when it comes to points won at home. While if you kind of flip that round and look at how many points each team in the division have won away from home, Dortmund are actually third behind Wolfsburg. Of all clubs, Niko Kovac just kind of popping up there as he has done this season. Wolfsburg just randomly good at things. It's so bizarre. But they're 4 points behind Bayern on the road. So, and we kind of talked about how, you know, I think 3 of Dortmund's last 5 games of the season are at home. But they've got this game, and then I think it's maybe a away fixture at Augsburg. And, you know, like, I don't need to tell any Dortmund fan that these are the banana skins that keep them up at night. And I think it's going to be a really tight game. So I have gone for a Dortmund win, but I've gone for a 2-1 Dortmund win because I just feel like it's going to be very tense. It's going to be very tight. But at the end of the day, I do feel like Dortmund has enough firepower. They have enough forward players just kind of all firing on all cylinders to kind of get over this game. But by no means I think it's going to be an easy match. And as you said, it's going to make for a great Friday match.
Yeah, this is a Friday match that you should be tuning into. And, you know, I think if Dortmund win this will put all sorts of pressure and on Bayern Munich. It's Bayern Munich side that I think is very fragile. But we'll get to that in a moment because they won't be playing till Sunday. Which will make this even more interesting because they will have a full 48 hours to digest it. And I think that too is something that this team can't handle well. But we'll get to that. Up next is Leipzig against Hoffenheim. Stefan, I wrote about Hoffenheim today. You know, taking the Ozan Kabak quotes and writing about Pellegrino Matarazzo and how in the last 5 games he's really turned it around. You know, 10 points, it's a 2-point average. After 5 games that they lost, right? Really moving Hoffenheim out of the danger zone. They are against Leipzig, and I'm curious how you feel about this, but unfortunately I think Leipzig are going to win this game 2-1. So curious what your thoughts are here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good match actually to just highlight the Substack in general, because not only did you write about Hoffenheim this week, but I actually wrote about Leipzig this week, and I kind of wrote a kind of scathing critique of this team following that Leverkusen match, because it felt to me like such a great microcosm of Leipzig's season, in a sense that they have this kind of star-studded squad, but not a number of those players just were not living up, just currently aren't living up to scratch. And I mean, I think the most obvious one was Danny Olmo, who kind of huffed and puffed this game without really offering much. And you know, the gist of my newsletter was basically just kind of going through that squad and saying who had to get cut, who had to stay. And there's a really good scene, and there's a really good Simpsons episode when Homer becomes the head coach of an is like the high school head, or I guess it's not high school, I guess elementary school American football team, and he's like extremely harsh, and there's like a post credit scene where he's just saying cut, you know, he's just cutting all these kids from the team. And I kind of feel like that's what Marco Rosa has to do this summer, because I think there are honestly 8 or 9 players in that squad who just don't offer anything anymore. So Leipzig have their issues, and you know, I think that's why a Leverkusen team, even without Florian Wirtz, were able to kind of keep them at bay and hit them on the counter-attack. Having said all that, I do kind of feel like Hoffenheim are different beasts from Leverkusen, and I do feel like Leipzig, while they struggle to kind of break down that Leverkusen team, they probably will get through Hoffenheim. I don't, even though Hoffenheim have kind of bounced back, I don't think they're undefeatable by any means, as we saw last weekend. You know, decent teams can still get through them. So I think it's going to be a very tight match, but I think Leipzig will win that one. So I've gone for a 2-1 win for Marco Rosa's side.
Yeah, so we're in accord on this one. This next one is Union Berlin against Leverkusen. And Stefan, what do you think here?
So this was almost my game of the week, actually, because I actually think it's going to be a really fascinating match. You know, I just kind of mentioned Leverkusen there, and I thought they were really, really impressive for different reasons against Leipzig. We're used to Leverkusen being this very attacking, very kind of gung-ho side, but they were really disciplined, they were really defensive, they sat deep against Leipzig, and they broke on 2 really good counter-attacks through Diaby and then Frimpong, actually. And they're just kind of like the team of the moment, aren't they? If I'm not mistaken, yeah, they're top of the form table in terms of the last 5 match days. Yeah. They're second in over the last 10 match days. You know, Xabi Alonso's getting a huge amount of praise. He's been linked to Bayern Munich. He's been linked to Liverpool, Real Madrid, you name it. You know, he's which is understandable, because he's obviously, you know, he went from star-studded team to star-studded team as a player. So obviously as a manager, a lot of people are keeping their eye on him. But I do kind of feel like they're going to be up against a really tough Union Berlin side who, you know, I think you kind of made a kind of tongue-in-cheek remark about them after the last match day, kind of saying they've kind of managed to kind of get back into the swing of things. They've kind of really kind of clung on to third place with just about everything they have, with a really impressive kind of 1-0 win against Gladbach the weekend there. And they've now managed to open up a 4-point gap between them and Leipzig. And I wouldn't be surprised if Union Berlin kind of managed to hold on to that, to be honest, between now and the end of the season. And I guess a long story short here is I think we've got 2 good teams coming up against each other, and I've struggled to take them apart. So I've gone for a 2-2 draw.
I almost went for a 2-2 draw. Eventually I went for a 2-1 Leverkusen win, but I more or less agree with everything you're saying here. I think that Leverkusen are just too much in form. What's the update on Wirtz? Do we know?
I think he should be back. I'm not entirely sure what was the issue. I want to say it's gastronomical. I think they said something like that in terms of what was wrong with him. And I also think they are kind of just taking it easy with him, because I think this is the second time, if I'm not mistaken, that he's been either... because I think the week before last he didn't start. Because I watched that game too. And so I think on Europa League weeks he does tend to kind of drop out the team at the weekend. So I think he probably should be back in the team for this one. It didn't seem to me like it was a big thing. I haven't checked, mind you, so I could be wrong. But as they showed against Leipzig, they are now capable of winning without Wirtz, even if it's by no means as easy or as slick.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you have to remember too that they have that really big Europa League fixtures coming up against Roma, right? And that might be still an easier path back to the Champions League than the Bundesliga. So we have to wait and see. Nonetheless, I think that this is going to be a really fun game to watch. It's probably the biggest game of all the 3:30 kickoffs to tune into. All right, Köln against Freiburg. Stefan, Freiburg just don't want to go away. They keep sitting in that top 4 spot, and they keep sitting there, and they keep sitting there, and before we know it, it's Matchday 34, and they're right there, and they'll be in it. And I think, and I'm curious to hear what you think, but I think they're going to beat Köln, and I think they're going to beat them 2-0.
Yeah, I've gone for a very similar result, to be honest. I don't think this is a very tricky one to predict. I mean, we always say that, it usually is, but it was one of the easier ones for me this weekend, and I've gone for a 3-1 win. I think Cologne are doing just fine, but their home form's not particularly impressive. They've picked up some decent results recently, but I think they're undefeated in maybe 4. But Freiburg are Freiburg right now. They seem really hell bent on getting that 4th place, and I don't think Cologne are going to stop them.
No, easy one to predict. Frankfurt against Augsburg. What do you think here?
This one is quite tricky actually. Frankfurt are just on a complete kind of nosedive at the moment. 3 defeats in the last 5, 2 draws. And then obviously got absolutely spanked off Dortmund last weekend. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot kind of going on at Frankfurt right now. There's talk of the chairman maybe leaving, or I don't know if it's the chairman, sporting director maybe leaving to move to Bayern.
It's the chairman, Hellmann. Replacing Kahn.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the players, certain stars moving on. Even Oliver Glasner, there's a lot of speculation over him, and things just aren't going very well for them right now. So. I don't know. I just feel like I think this game's up for the grabs, to be honest with you. And I think Augsburg haven't been particularly great either. But in fact, over the course of the last 5 match days, Augsburg and Frankfurt are both in the bottom 3 in terms of points won. Only Hertha have picked up fewer points. So I've gone for a kind of drab 1-1 draw here.
Yeah, I almost went for that too. But I am convinced that the Frankfurt performance explosion is just a step away and it has to come eventually. So why not just against Augsburg, just to do me a little bit of a favor. So I went for a 3-1 Frankfurt win here. I just feel that team has too much quality for what they're showing at the moment, Stefan. So I sense at some point, if they don't turn it around here, I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Because they can't rely on winning the DFB Pokal to get back into Europe. But at some point they gotta turn this around, and I think this might be a really good moment for them to do so. But we'll see. All right, that gets us to Stuttgart against Gladbach. Your Stuttgart side, Stefan. What do you think?
Yeah, I've actually gone for a very narrow Stuttgart win here, to be honest with you. Gladbach haven't really been bad recently. They obviously lost narrowly to Union Berlin, but they picked up 3 draws and a win 4 games before that. And I think the only thing that's really kind of swung it for Stuttgart for me is that Gladbach's away from the season. It's just been absolutely dreadful. They've only won 1 out of 14. They've ground out a fair amount of draws, to be fair to them, but it's that home form that's really managing to keep them away from the threat of relegation, or even just that kind of bottom half of the table mayhem. So I don't really expect them to pick up many points at home. And then in contrast, we've talked a lot about Stuttgart and the way that they've managed to kind of turn things around. They've obviously, their last home game was that really impressive fight back against Dortmund, and I feel like Gladbach would be here for the taking. So I've gone for a 1-0 win for Stuttgart.
Yeah, I went for a 2-1 win for Stuttgart, for pretty much all the things that you said. I also think that Hoeneß is starting to turn things around there, and that's, Gladbach don't have much to play for anymore either, right? They're just sitting there and waiting for the season to end, and then all the key players can just move on, and they can finally getting into this rebuilding project. So why hurt anyone? I know no one wants to hear that, but it kind of feels like that, right? So yeah. Anyhow, Schalke against Werder, and I think that's your game of the week, right?
Yeah, I mean it speaks for itself. It's a relegation 6-pointer. Maybe not quite for Werder Bremen. Obviously, I think if I'm not mistaken, they've got about a good 10 points now between them and 16th. So I think they're probably absolutely fine.
Surely that's enough.
But what was that? Were you shushing your cat there?
No, I said surely that's enough.
Oh, right, sorry. I thought you were shushing.
No. I kind of shushing Werder Bremen here to finally get this done.
Yeah, well, I think they might just do it, to be honest with you. I thought, I don't know, Schalke, I feel like they're kind of running out of runway here in terms of trying to kind of turn things around in enough time. They might still be able to kind of cling on to 16th place and try and stay out from the playoff, but it's hard to foresee them kind of getting a result against Werder Bremen, who've been kind of able to kind of bounce back recently. And I think more importantly, their away form's actually been really good this season. They're 9th in the league for away form, and it's kind of been the kind of bedrock of their season, to be more or less, to be fair. We saw, obviously, the fans went absolutely bonkers. Last weekend in Berlin, I think maybe 20,000, 30,000 fans showed up. Maybe more, actually. And I understand why, because that's where they picked up the vast majority of their points this season. And I don't really think Schalke are going to stop them. So I've gone for a 2-1 win for Werder Bremen in this game.
See, I went for... I also count Werder into this mushy middle, we don't really care anymore season pack. And I think Schalke are they're just gonna care a little bit more. I mean, this is the dangerous situation, right, for Werder, that it is 10 points, and surely that's enough, but who knows? But I actually went for a 2-0 Schalke win here.
Wow.
Home win, which, of course, huge implications in the relegation battle, right? Because when you look at it, that gets them to 27 points. That relegation battle is going to go right down to the wire, Stefan.
Yeah.
I think
we talked about this on the bonus show, didn't we, this week with Chris, in terms of why it's been so tight and whether it's been one of the best in recent seasons.
Well, it is tight because even the team at the very bottom could pick up points against teams at the very top, which gets us to Bayern against Hertha. And you scolded me ahead of the show because you said, surely you're not picking Hertha to win against Bayern. I'm not that stupid. But I do think they're going to get a point. I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I think I'm going to shock a lot of people here. I have my reasons. I think this Bayern team is broken to the core. And if this is a game that they have to win, even to just keep their... I know it's only a point to Dortmund. And I know a lot of Bayern fans out there think that, they're going to turn this around. There's so much quality. There's strength and depth. We have the best squad in Europe. And it's you look at the likes of Kimmich and Goretzka. There was a huge article in Süddeutsche Zeitung that came out today, Stefan, which was really interesting to read. And sort of how those two players in particularly are very broken at the moment. And that just seemed to be almost at this identity crisis. A lot of it coming back to the World Cup. Then there being no Neuer. Müller is kind of looking for his form. The entire spine of that team is broken. And when you have that, together with the things that are happening everywhere else in the squad, Sadio Mane punching out Leroy Sané, you have a board that is looking actively at other candidates. We mentioned Hellmann, the Frankfurt executive, who could be moving to from the Main to the Isar at any moment, right? You look at Hoeneß showing up at the training ground, something that the players apparently didn't receive very well. I was saying to you on the show, it feels like Bayern might not win another game this season. And I think that because you will have all these individuals trying to fix it, they're going to make it worse. And also, I don't think they're going to be able to score many goals. And if Hertha sneak a goal here, that might be enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, you make some great points. But I don't know. I mean, by no means do I think Bayern are going to absolutely, thump Hertha. But as bad as Bayern have been this season, I just feel like Hertha are still much worse. Any prospect of a Pal Dardai bounce kind of came undone at the weekend, or last weekend rather, against Werder Bremen, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know. I mean, I can understand if the team had some kind of bite to them, if they still had some strong points, they could maybe take advantage of Bayern. But I think even when Bayern have been bad this season, they have been bad over the last couple of weeks, but I go back to like that Mainz result recently, and well, not recently, last weekend rather, sorry, I was actually thinking of the Hoffenheim game, but I guess Mainz worked as well. They still create a huge amount of chances, and while they don't have someone in there to kind of put them away, and that's obviously dogged them for much of this, 2023 at least. I think the fact they still create a number of chances, I think that should still steer them through a team like Hertha Berlin, because they'll just have so much space, so much time in the box. Even the Serge Gnabry's and out of form Jamal Musiala's of this world should still be able to put that away. And I'm not actually sure if Choupo-Moting's back for this game, but if he is, then I think it should be a pretty comfortable Bayern win, to be honest. So I've gone for a 2-0 win.
I think it's crazy that they're relying on Choupo-Moting to paper things over. That was actually another point that was made in the Süddeutsche Zeitung article, and we've kind of been saying this for a while now, but it's kind of crazy that he papered over all these very obvious cracks for so long. Maybe my final point on this game is Pal Dardai finally had a full week to work with this team. And one of his biggest strengths has, in previous years when he did keep Hertha in the league, has been set pieces, goals from set pieces. And I think that is something that could hurt Bayern. And another thing is, Hertha are actually the team with the most penalties scored in the Bundesliga. So they won't even need... they might not even need a chance. They might just get a penalty, and that might be enough. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Because if Bayern drop points against Hertha, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter that much because they have such a big goal differential that's almost like an extra point for them. So whether it's 1 point or 3 points to Dortmund, it doesn't really matter that much. But if they don't pick up points here, then win here, then I think they won't pick up another win this season, and they know it. And I think that adds to the story. But we'll see.
Without a doubt, if they can't beat Hertha at home, then the game's finished.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, that gets us to the final game, Wolfsburg against Mainz. I had issues predicting this one because these two teams seem so unpredictable. Mainz in particular, very good at home, right? Bad and on the road, or was it the other way around? I always mix the two up. Wolfsburg is the team that's great on the road, though. So they're playing at home. And because of all of this, I went for a 2-2 draw, because Mainz actually are one of those teams still with a shout of making it maybe into Europe. So are Wolfsburg, right? So those two teams are still actually playing for something. And yeah, I think this is actually a really interesting match to finish off the match day, but I also one where I can't really separate the two.
Yeah, it should make for a really interesting game on Sunday night, actually, because it's just going to be a match between two teams who still have kind of ambitions of get into Europe next season. There's only 2 points between both of them. And they've both been quite good recently as well. Surprisingly and quite remarkably, Wolfsburg have drawn 4 of the last home games. So I can completely understand your point of view, and it's actually a scoreline that I almost very closely went for. But the only thing that's kind of buoyed me towards a Mainz win is the fact that their home form is quite impressive this season. They're joint 6th at home, and Wolfsburg's home form, as I mentioned, with the 4 draws, has been a little lackluster, to be honest with you. They picked up 4 wins from 14. So I think it's going to be a very tight game. I think a draw is perfectly possible. But I don't know. I just feel like Mainz are on a bit of a run right now. Having said that, every time you beat Bayern, you end up losing your next 3 games.
Yep.
So there's that to keep in mind too. But no, I'm going to stick with my original suggestion. I'm going to go for 2-1 Mainz.
Yeah, the Bayern Munich curse is real. It's like finding a mummy. How all the people that did the archaeological work in Egypt died after they opened the pyramids. Beating Bayern Munich is like the same curse. Anyways, that draws the conclusion to our Matchday 30 preview show. We have 4 more after this. The season is slowly coming to an end. Next week, we have the Europa League back, so we're going to see if we can sort of draw a podcast in on that one way or another. Of course, as always, the show is brought to you in association with Get German Football News, who are always extremely kind to promote this podcast on Twitter, on their really big and excellent Twitter feed. And they bring a lot of great German football news to English audience. So please give them a follow, check them out. And yeah, this podcast is brought to you by Bet Online. Don't forget the sponsors. They are important. And Stefan, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, not really. Just to implore everyone to have fun this weekend and enjoy their German football.
Yeah, it's interesting. No matter what happens, we'll still have a title race. So it's going to be hugely fascinating. So enjoy the weekend, enjoy the football. We'll be back next week. Until then, auf Wiedersehen.
In Sicht.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.